These guys are still a pretty hot commodity, the old Berkeley flatworm. If you guys haven't seen the video that I did on the bounty fish, you gotta go check that out. This is the Amakatsu Stealth Swimmer. Sick bait. This is how you properly put a swim bait back in the clamshell. I'm honestly I'm feeling overwhelmed. That is literally a pile of trash. If you guys don't have this in your boat or with you at all times, I'm telling you, you need to go to the store today and buy it. Are we spending too much money on tackle? Probably. This year, one of the biggest things that I would really love to do is just be more organized with all my tackle. My boat is a natural disaster right now. When I open these compartments, it's even worse. And I really want to kind of keep better track of what I do have. Sometimes I'm at a store and I'm buying something or I'm shopping online, and then I get out in the boat and I'm digging through my boat and I realize that I just bought a pack of worms or whatever, and I already had 2 packs of them in the boat. So really, I think that this video is actually gonna be a series of videos. We're gonna do my chatterbait box and my jig box and my square bill box, my deep crankbait box, my big worm box, and I'm gonna, 1, organize it, and 2, just basically tell you like what you need as far as that lure category goes. Today, I wanna do my Senko box. We all have kind of a Senko box or maybe a bag. You know, you go down the aisle at a Bass Pro Shops or Cabela's, or you shop online, and Senkos and stick baits, 1, every brand has one, and 2, they come in like 50, 100, I mean, there's so many different colors. If you guys enjoy this, just let me know. It's a little bit different than my typical video, but you know, mixing up content is something that I try to do. I don't want to just feed you guys the same stuff all the time, or you might get bored with me, and I don't want you to get bored with me. So, all right, let's get to it. If you guys know, Yamamoto Senkos are fairly expensive. It's basically $1 per individual bait. And right now at Sportsman's Outfitters, you can get a pack of Senkos for I think $5.99 when it's typically like $8.99 or $9.99. So you can save a lot of money, pick up a ton of different Senkos right now and have them all for next year. I'm gonna leave a link for all the lures that I talk about today down below in the description. Hey, and if you wanna check out one of the new Berkeley gillies, I'm actually getting ready to do a review on this bait in probably a month or so. So, all right, back to the video. Ooh, gosh. Most of these things that are sitting up here are rusty. I don't like to be like this. Open her up. Ah, geez. All right, we just got down to the Senko box. Got that compartment completely cleaned out. So now this video can officially begin. I keep a lot of my soft plastic baits for the most part in your 3700 style like Plano box. There's a lot of companies that make this style of box. They're all very similar. They're all about the same size. When it comes to putting your Senko style bait like this in one of these compartments, you really only have enough room for 8 different sizes and or colors. Today, we're really gonna talk specifically about the 5-inch Senkos. I do use some of the bigger ones, those like 6 and 7-inch ones, but it's very rare. And I do use some of the smaller ones, those 3 and 4-inch ones, specifically when I'm drop shot fishing. So I'll get into those when we talk about a drop shot box. So I'm using the word Senko a lot because that is kind of the original type of plastic worm that is like this. You know, a lot of different companies have them now. You have obviously the Gary Yamamoto Senko, you have a Yum Dinger, Gambler makes a Fat Ace, Strike King makes an Ocho, Berkeley makes their General. There's a lot of little differences in all of those baits. Some of them have a lot more salt in them, and some of them don't have any salt at all. The original, the Senko, actually has quite a bit of salt in it, which gives it the rate of fall that it has. It really adds some weight to that soft plastic, which is nice for when you're fishing it weightless, but that is drastically different than a bait like the Yum Dinger. The Yum Dinger doesn't have a whole lot of salt in it. Now that particular bait actually has a very slow fall. It's almost buoyant in the water, like it actually kind of almost floats up. All right, so let's talk about Senko colors and when to use them. This particular Senko style bait, I probably use it, I don't know, 75% of the time. Like this one lure, this one color, is responsible for me catching a ton of different bass when it comes to fishing a Senko, and that is this one right here. This is a green pumpkin, green and purple flake Senko. I think that Sportsman's Outfitters has it labeled as green pumpkin green on their website. I mean, this is my favorite like Senko ever. Like I've used this on big lakes. I've used this in a lot of ponds. Like if I'm fishing a pond, if I'm bank fishing, this is what I'm gonna bring with me. Most ponds have kind of a clearer to lightly stained water visibility, and this is perfect for that. But even if you have a pond that's fairly off color, this will still work. And even if you have a pond that has that kind of tannic colored tea color water, like in Florida, this will still work. Now in Florida, I tend to use a little bit darker worms, and we're gonna get into that in just a minute here. This color is my favorite color, but if I'm fishing this on a wacky rig, I'm gonna use the Gary Yamamoto Senko. If I'm fishing this on something that sinks, like a Texas rig or a shaky head, I actually tend to use the Yum Dinger. And again, it's because the Yum Dinger is a little bit more buoyant than this bait is, and so it helps keep that worm off of the bottom, because sometimes when you're fishing ponds, especially when you're fishing ponds, that bottom can be a little silty, and the bass don't always like to get into that silt to pick that bait up. So if that worm is sticking up, they'll come up, they'll grab the tail of that worm and then suck in the whole worm. This one worm here though was almost responsible for me qualifying for the Bassmaster Elite Series. I was fishing this exact worm on a weightless Texas rig on docks at Lake Champlain back in 2018. I flipped this little bait in between a dock and a boat. The bass hit it right away, and my line, like you can probably visualize this, my line would just kept on going. I set the hook into that fish, and that bass, man, it came out from underneath that boat, and I'm only fishing in about 2 foot of water. This bass comes out from underneath this boat and just comes up in the air, and it's a 6-pound largemouth. It's a giant for Lake Champlain. And I wrestled this thing all the way to the boat, and I get it right next to the boat, and I put my hand underneath this fish, and it flops one more time. You can't use a net in the opens. This sucker flops one more time, comes out of my hand and makes a hard dive, and the line broke. Like randomly, I've broken off some fish on the hook set, but I've never broken off a fish for that reason. Like literally it dove and it broke my line, and it's almost like I knew it right then. It's almost like that tournament wasn't even like the last tournament of the year. I think it was the second to last tournament, but I knew right then, I'm like, man, that fish cost me big time, and it did. It cost me a chance of going to the Bassmaster Elite Series. Trying to not let that one haunt me, but it probably will for the rest of my life. All right, moving on. The next color that is extremely important for you guys to have is Junebug. Junebug is kind of a purplish color. Typically it has like green flake in it. These two colors right here will be great for any condition that I'm fishing. If I'm fishing in darker colored water, typically I'm gonna go with the Junebug. Muddy water, Junebug. Dark conditions outside, Junebug. If it's clear water, I go with the more natural. You can get away with probably 90% of bass fishing a Senko with these two right here that I'm holding, Junebug and some sort of green pumpkin. This is another one that I rig up on a Texas rig a lot. And so anytime I'm fishing a Texas rig, I'm going to use that Yum Dinger. I believe I get a few more bites by using the Yum Dinger in that case than I do with the Senko that has more salt in it. Now, if you guys fish around tannic colored water, so that's that tea colored water, Junebug is just a phenomenal color in that situation. Like I said, I don't know exactly why, but it just is. So you don't always have to know why, as long as you know that it works. Now, the next color that I don't have in this box is one that I also use a tremendous amount, and that is straight black. This is a very interesting color to me because I think black kind of goes under the radar. A lot of guys are gonna use, for instance, I got a black and blue here. You know, a lot of guys use a black and blue is a phenomenal color. I'm not saying that it's not, but black is something in my mind that is actually very natural, but it works in very muddy water. So The thing that's interesting about black, there's not a lot of glitter. It's not putting off a ton of flash and everything like that. It's just kind of subtle down there, just this black silhouette down there. And the thing about black that a lot of guys don't think about is it actually works very well in extremely clear water. And a lot of us don't think about that at times. A lot of us are going to think about black fishing it in muddier or stained water. And that is the other time that I like to fish it. A lot of times what I like to do is flip a Senko into shallow wood cover, and I will use it on a Texas rig. And black, especially if I'm fishing kind of off color water, fairly muddy water, that is a great combination for that muddy water. But fishing it in really, really clear water is also a very good idea. And I actually learned this from a guy named Garrett Paquette. Now, Garrett Paquette is a guy that I used to room with fishing on the opens, and he fished on the Bassmaster Elite Series. And this is something that he has used a lot for clear water, both smallmouth and largemouth. One of his favorite things to do is rig up a black Senko on a heavy drop shot rig and flip it into grass. And he catches a lot of bass doing it that way. And that's really kind of where I first learned about how well black can work in clear water. Don't forget to pick up some black Senko style baits. In this case, most of the time I'm using a dinger, again, because of the buoyancy. The next color Senko that I think you really, really want to get is a watermelon red. Watermelon red, in my mind, is another like color that I feel like a lot of guys don't always throw. A lot of guys are going to pick up that green pumpkin, and green pumpkin catches them. But there are times that I've seen that a watermelon red color gets bit when it seems like no other lure will really get bait. So when I like to use watermelon red, and I almost don't even want to say this, it's just something that a lot of guys don't always think about, but when you hear it, you're like, oh, no duh. But it's during the pre-spawn. We all know that bass love red baits during that pre-spawn, whether it's a red crankbait, a red chatterbait, a red lipless crankbait. If you're fishing during the pre-spawn and you're fishing like a Texas rig Senko or a weightless Senko, watermelon red with that little bit of red flash really can catch a lot of bass. Again, not everyone always thinks about that, but when you hear it, you're like, oh, that makes sense, like no duh. Now, watermelon red is also another one of those Florida baits. I actually have quite a bit. I talk about Florida a lot because I have a lot of experience down in Florida. I fished there every single year growing up as a child, and I have fished tons of tournaments down there on Lake Toho, the Harris Chain of Lakes. I fished all over Central Florida, and watermelon red is another fantastic color down in Florida. Now, another time that I fish the watermelon red is when I'm fishing muddy water for pressured bass. A lot of times watermelon red is not a color that you're going to associate with muddier water, but if you are fishing in really off color water, a lot of guys are going to pick darker baits, kind of like what we talked about earlier with the June bugs and the blacks. But watermelon red, because of that red flash, I think that it actually shows pretty well in muddy water. And I have seen it be the difference between catching fish and not when a guy is going down the bank flipping a bait that is June bug or dark colored, and you go behind them and you're going to catch a lot more bass on that watermelon red. And again, this really pertains to pressured bodies of water. A lot of times if you're not fishing around a lot of pressure, that black or that June bug is probably going to work better. But if you're fishing around pressure bodies of water, watermelon red is a sneaky color to use. Now, the next two colors I don't have with me, but I tend to use the next two colors strictly during the summer. And the first one is going to be chartreuse pepper. The chartreuse pepper was the exact first stick bait, Senko style bait that I ever started fishing, like period. Like that was the first one. I remember going to Bass Pro Shops and I picked up a new bait cast rod and reel that day. And I was pretty young. I mean, I was, I think 13 years old. And the guy that was there said, you should use some of these chartreuse pepper Senkos. And I'm a 13-year-old. I'm like, okay. And so I picked up a bunch of them. And I remember going to ponds all over the place and catching the fire out of bass on that chartreuse pepper Senko. Whether you fish ponds or not, this is a great bait that a lot of guys aren't throwing. Although it's called chartreuse pepper, it's almost like a natural chartreuse color because of the black that's in it. So it tends to be a bait that I use in clear water situations. The other thing that I really love this color for, and this is, again, there's a lot of, As I'm talking about this, I realize there's a lot of things that I don't know why they work. I just know that they do work. And this is the exact same thing with a Carolina rig. For some reason, a Carolina rig and a chartreuse pepper Senko works phenomenally. I don't know why, and that's something, again, I do that in the summer. If you guys can remember, I remember reading some old Bassmaster magazines where they were using chartreuse pepper French fries on a Carolina rig, and I think it's the same concept. Now, why that color tends to produce well, I have no idea. Like, I'm just being honest with you. I don't know why it does, I just know that it does. So chartreuse pepper is another color that I really, really love. Now the next color that I absolutely love, again, don't have it with me, and this is kind of that red bug type color. I think red bug is a color that Yum Dinger makes, but this is really, the color is kind of like that plum color, that plum apple color. And one of my absolute favorite colors to use during the summertime on offshore ledges is a 10.5-inch Zoom Old Monster Worm in that plum color. And that red bug Senko, I kind of use it in the same situations, but I'm typically using it on some sort of bigger shaky head. This is what I use a lot to kind of clean up in the summer. If I go down a ledge and I catch fish on that Zoom Old Monster and they stop biting, you can fire a shaky head out there with a 5-inch red bug Senko on it, and the fish are absolutely gonna tear that up. That's probably the only situation that I use that red bug color. I'm not saying that it wouldn't work elsewhere. Like, for instance, talking about the pre-spawn earlier, maybe it would work during the pre-spawn. I just simply haven't tried it, and I'm not gonna tell you to go try something that I haven't tried. So red bug, though, during the summer on a shaky head, it can be phenomenal. Now, the next color Senko that you wanna pick up is some sort of white-ish color. This is a little bit of an off-white. This is actually an Ocho made by Strike King. But what I use a white for is strictly as a follow-up bait for if a bass misses a topwater. So anytime I'm fishing a topwater bait, I always, 100% of the time, will rig up some sort of weightless Senko to kind of follow up on a fish that misses that lure. This is something that is not new, but I like to use a white colored one because a lot of times when I'm fishing a topwater, I'm mimicking a shad with a white topwater bait. If I'm fishing a grass flat and a bass comes up and hits my spook and misses it, and that spook is white and I kind of set and he doesn't keep following it, I'm gonna reel that spook in as quick as I can. If I throw a green pumpkin Senko at him, I feel like I don't get as many bites as if I throw a white one because the bait that he just saw was white. In my mind, I'm trying to make that bass think that he killed whatever that bait was. He killed that shad, and now that shad is just slowly falling down in his face, and he goes over there and gobbles it up. Those are the 7 colors that I really think are a must when it comes to fishing a Senko. We have the green pumpkin, green flake, we have a June bug, we have black, we have watermelon red, chartreuse pepper, red bug, white, but that's only 7 colors, and I actually have 8 different slots in my tackle box. So that 8th spot, I'm gonna leave that open to you because depending on where you live in the country, there might be a color that kind of works better in your situation. For instance, if I live in Florida, that color is probably gonna be taken up by a black and blue worm like this. You know, black and blue is a great color down in Florida for whatever reason. It's kind of like that June bug, that tannic water, that dark color. It just works. I really like this one with this little blue tail. I have fished on the James River a ton, and a color that I really, really like on the James River is a green pumpkin blue flake. Now, on the James River, you actually have a blue crab that some of those bass will actually eat. And so I don't know if that's the reason. That makes sense in my mind. I can't tell you that is the reason, but I also like to use a green pumpkin magic swirl over there when I'm flipping like a beaver, which has blue in it too, and it works extremely good. So if you live over there, that might be something that you would fish as well. Now, if you live by a very clear water body of water, like extremely clear water, maybe you fish for smallmouth, a good color is that smoke purple color. That's a really great color for smallmouth. You can even rig a 5-inch Senko on a drop shot for smallmouth. Catches some big smallmouth, but that's a great color also for them. So those are kind of the colors and where and when I like to use them. If you guys want to pick up some Senko style baits, I'm gonna leave a link for the ones that I talked about down below for Sportsman's Outfitters, so you guys can click and check them out. Again, Senkos are only $5.99 right now at Sportsman's Outfitters. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, again, just please let me know. And if you guys want to learn a little bit more about Senkos and techniques and mistakes that you could be making with a Senko style bait, click on this video right here. I appreciate you guys watching. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.